Hey, thanks for joining me today for episode 49 of Podcasting Your Brand. I'm your host, producer Jemmy, providing learning lessons for you to podcast your brand. And today I'm going to share a podcasting 101 topic, prepping for your guests. This episode is brought to you by my own brand, Flintstone Media. Listen in and let's do this. Since there is a high probability that your show will have guests, even if not now, perhaps in the future, like my plan is with this show, I want to share some tips that will help you best prepare for those guests. So today I'm going to share with you a few suggestions for finding them, approaching them, scheduling them, and preparing them for your recording session. So let's start with finding them. First, I want to take you back to episode 35. When I had to examine your ecosystem. And part of the intention of that effort was to identify potential guests. And that brings me to a quick point I want to mention if you're a new podcaster. As a new podcaster, one of the biggest favors you can do for yourself is to start with people you know and are comfortable with as your first guests. Whether they are family, friends, clients, associates, or anyone else you know pretty well and who is subject matter appropriate, of course, invite them first. You'll be more comfortable and it'll be easier for stories and other details and useful like tangents and things to come up in your conversation naturally. So pull from your ecosystem list from episode 35, those who you know best to be your initial guests. Then utilize the rest of your list. And remember, it's a living list you're constantly adding to, right? Use the rest of your list as a resource for guests on an ongoing basis. And as we went through together in episode 35, I keep saying that again, episode 35, I'll link it in the show notes. You'll be sourcing guests from your business network, your personal network, your industry network, your local network, and your online network. Okay, now that you have your list of desired guests, here are some tips on approaching them, getting their attention, and getting them to say yes to being your guest. First, it's all about establishing a rapport. Engage with them on their social media, like a couple of their posts, leave a couple of comments. This is really just so that they take notice of you. So don't overdo it or be disingenuous. Just stick to engaging in a way that reflects your honest interest in having them as your guest. Then visit their website. See if they have a preferred method of being approached for guest requests. They may have an intake form on their website or have a place where their assistant or maybe they're working with an agent, but their contact information is provided for these exact kind of inquiries. So you want to go through the preferred channel if there is one. But if they don't have one, then just reach out, send an email, and also send them a direct message over whichever social media channel they are very clearly engaged in a lot. And I'd say to send these two messages within a couple of minutes of each other. In fact, you can say in your DM, hey, I just sent this by email, but I wanted to send it here too, just in case, or vice versa, right? Why? Well, first, the reason I recommend sending both an email and a direct message rather than just one versus the other is because in my observation over the years, it's kind of 50-50 which method any given potential guest is more receptive to. So why not both? Put yourself in both places to make sure you're not missed. And if you do it within a minute of each other, it negates any potential stalker vibes. You're really just saying, hey, I'm sending it here too, just in case. And that's it. And with this initial contact, you want to set up a future conversation. So don't lay out all the details of your show and send your one sheet and your sizzle reel and all the things in your very first message to them. That would be completely overwhelming to anybody. So don't do that. You're just trying to send a message that's like a layup for a future conversation. Now, here's where I need to divide my advice into two different roads because podcasters really vary on whether they prefer to have a pre-interview call with their guest or not. And their reasoning is so sound on either side that I really just want you to make the choice that's best for you, because the choice of which direction to go on this truly is yours. So I'll share some of the reasonings so you can make the best decision for yourself. So those who do prefer a pre-interview call, sometimes also called a pre-show interview, they like the opportunity to feel the guest out. They want to get a sense of their on-mic chemistry with them and potentially discover even more talking points for their real interview. Whereas those who don't prefer a pre-interview call, I find that they usually don't, because they want all of those moments of discovery to happen within the recorded interview itself. So they want to skip right over that pre-interview. And there are some workarounds and further arguments for both sides, and I'm sure I'll get into all of that. And I will get into all of that on a future episode in covering pre-interview strategies. But for now, I'm going to take this part down two separate roads. So if you do like a pre-interview, then your initial message should include an invitation to jump on a call with you. If you do not like a pre-interview, then your initial message can be a simple introduction, because you're keeping your pre-show communications restricted to messages and emails, no calls. So if you don't want a pre-interview, just introduce yourself and your show and mention that the reason you're reaching out is because you're interested in having them on as a guest, and then let the communications back and forth just happen naturally, with your goal being to directly schedule their interview. And within those communications, right in the beginning, explain, number one, why you think your listeners can benefit from having them on. Number two, why the guest would benefit, for example, by being able to impart some wisdom that they've been building up over the years, or by the opportunity to increase their overall exposure. And number three, how your listeners may even be directly interested in the products or services that your guest may have to offer. So emphasize either the size of your audience or how well niched your audience is to be their perfect potential clients and customers as well. So that's the communications you want to have. Make sure you talk about especially why them being a guest on your show will be really, really great for them and really, really great for your audience. The one person you don't really need to highlight it being great for is yourself. Because if you remember from episode 46, I really emphasized with you that the show is all about your listeners. So if you need to rewind and refresh on that wisdom, then go back to episode 46. But emphasize in your pitch to your potential guests the benefits for them and the benefits for your listeners, not yourself. And some optional things to include in your pre-interview communications are your sizzle reel, which I went over in the last episode 48, and a one sheet for your show, which I'll cover on a future episode. Hopefully I'll be saying future episodes less and less and less, because I'll be actually producing them, but whatever. Well, one sheet for your show is a second optional piece in addition to a sizzle reel that you can conclude. And I'll talk about one sheets on a future episode. And it is always good to include a link to your website or your social media so that your potential guest can learn more about you. You're going to this conversation knowing a good bit about them. Give them a chance to know about you. Okay, so now how do you schedule your guests? Well, there are two schools of thought on this one too. And either option can be a best fit for you. And the second school of thought on scheduling, I'll be honest, surprised the heck out of me when I first heard it. Okay, so a few years ago, I was asked to be a guest on Katie Krimitsos' show at the time, Biz Women Rock. Katie Krimitsos, if you're not familiar, she is a powerhouse in podcasting. She has the Women's Meditation Network, and she's phenomenal of what she does. Great, great following. But anyways, I was invited to be a guest on her previous show called Biz Women Rock. And in our email correspondence, she sent me a link to her scheduler, which allowed me to just pick a time that worked for me. What? After years of emails that sounded like, well, I'm free on this day at this time and this day at this time. And oh, no, neither of those will work for me. So sorry. Will this work instead? After years of emails like that, I thought a link to an automatic scheduler was the easiest and coolest thing in the world? So with a quickness, I set myself up with a schedule link too, and I started using it. In fact, I set up several for different occasions, and I began using them for everyone and everything that had a meeting of some kind. Easy peasy. And I thought that was the only opinion about automatic schedulers that could ever exist. And then I went on to Clubhouse. And in a Clubhouse room one day, I heard someone vehemently hate on scheduler links. I had never imagined such strong feelings could exist, but there they were. He mentioned how impersonal they felt and what a hassle it could be when there were way too many steps to fill in and things to click through and blah, blah, blah. But it blew my mind. It made sense, but it blew my mind. And I thought, oh my good God, how many times had I accidentally annoyed someone because I had never imagined this perspective or reaction. Ruh-roh. So I altered my approach. Now I say that they can either feel free to suggest 2 or 3 options that work for them for me to pick from, or to use my calendar link, whichever they prefer. So that's the middle ground solution I'm going to suggest for you too when it comes to scheduling your guests. Set yourself up with an auto scheduler for those who prefer to use that kind of system, but in your communications, present it as an option. So common auto schedulers currently out today are Calendly and OneHub. I personally use OneHub, and I'm sure I'll still often refer to it by its old name of Scheduled Once, but Calendly is probably the big kahuna. And of course, I'll put links to both in the show notes for you so you can find them really easy. And last but not least for today's episode is prepping your guests for your actual recording session itself. Some podcasters go the extra mile. And they send a USB mic ahead of time to each and every single guest who doesn't have one. That is definitely not the standard. And I don't want you to feel pressured to try to match that effort. What is standard is giving them, number 1, instructions on how to choose and prep the best space in their own place to best suit picking up good sound on their end. How do they pick a good room to record in? And then how do they optimize that room for the best sound on their side of the conversation? And number 2, you want to also send them instructions to absolutely, unequivocally, 100%, and for the love of all that's holy, wear headphones, please, for the love of God, wear headphones. And 3, you want to send them instructions, of course, on how to connect with you if it's a remote recording session, or where to go and when to be there if it's a recording session with them in person. I'll link my PDF on preparing your space to optimize your audio quality in the show notes for you, and you can then share it with your guests. I went really in depth on all of that on episode 40, so I won't do that here again. But I'll include a link to both the PDF and episode 40 for you in the show notes if you need those resources. And you'll want to instruct your guests to have their headphones and their microphone, if they do have a mic, plugged into their computer when they connect with you, so that the software that you're using, Zoom, Riverside, StreamYard, whatever, so that it has the best chance of automatically detecting their correct input and output sound settings by default. Input, as a reminder, is how the sound is getting into their system, whether it's their microphone or their computer's microphone, whatever. And the output is how it's getting out of their system in their headphones. So you want to make sure you have the best chance of your system choosing that by default. But you'll always want to double check their input and output sound settings anyway. And yours, of course, too. Your software's input should be picking up your USB mic, and theirs too if they have one. And perhaps most importantly, make sure your system is set to using, and it sounds repetitive, I don't care, set to using headphones on both sides for the output. Then press record, letting them know that you started the recorder. So hit record and then say, hey, recorders have started, recorders are on, whatever. Then, with those recorders on, end with these pre-recording notes for your guest. Write these down. Number 1, I'll do an introduction and bring you in. This sentence puts them at ease in the beginning and relieves any uncertainty that they may have about when they should start talking. When in the beginning are they actually supposed to start talking? Oh, this is an introduction to myself. Oh, okay, I should be quiet, right? Just tell them that right at the start. I'll do an introduction and bring you in. Number 2, if there's anything you'd like to start over and say differently or have us take out altogether, you can say cut. You, meaning the guest. Now, in the over 8 years that I've been doing this, I could probably count on one, maybe 2 hands, how many times a guest has actually said cut. It almost never happens, but it really helps put them at ease just knowing that they can. Number 3, I may say cut for a technical issue. If so, we'll just need to pause the conversation for a moment and then we'll restart. I, of course, means you, you as the host, because if there is a technical or a sound issue, you want to be able to say cut and not have it totally catch your guest off guard. But more importantly, from a mindset perspective, it makes you sound hella profesh, okay? I may say cut for a technical issue. Number 4, if we get disconnected, just use the same link to connect back in. That's pretty self-explanatory. You won't get a chance to tell them this if you're already accidentally disconnected, am I right? So you want to say that at the start. And number 5, at the end of the interview, we'll say goodbye like normal humans do, but stay on the line. We just want to be sure to capture that for the recording. And that 5th instruction right there allows you to both let your listeners hear the conversation end, but you can also then be sure you have a chance to wrap things up with your guest before they go from the session completely. Now, you may have heard that podcasters require their guests to sign release forms at some point in this process before allowing them to actually be a guest on the show. I'm not going to share my full thoughts on guest release forms yet, but for what it's worth for now, I haven't ever had a guest sign one yet. And I've personally very rarely been asked to sign one myself when I was on the other side of the microphone as a guest. But that's not technical legal advice, so don't take it as such. It's just a quick look back at my experience on the matter. So take it for what it's worth. Again, I'll dive in further down the line, but consult your own lawyer, okay? So for now, that's it. You're ready to record that amazing conversation with your guest. And as a quick mention, be sure that you are monetizing your expertise on the OWL app, spelled with 2 W's and 2 L's. Let people pick your brain after they have first picked their payment method. Sign up with my referral code PL954123 and get your $10 credit. I'm also really happy to announce that I am now co-hosting the new official podcast from OWL. So look for the OWL podcast on your podcast players soon. You can actually see the first 3 interviews that we recorded live on Facebook. Just look up the OWL page. Again, spelled with 2 W's and 2 L's. Up next on episode 50, I'll continue within this area of conversation with content prep for your guest interviews. So if you're not subscribed, be sure you do. In the meantime, I have a whole host of free tips for you on my website. Just check out flintstonemedia.com/free tips. Thanks for tuning in to Podcasting Your Brand. In this new chapter of the show, I'm revealing how you can harness the power of podcasting to expand your brand. So come and pick up what I've been putting down since 2014. Avoid common mistakes and propel your podcasting and branding forward. And if you have questions or are interested in becoming a sponsoring brand of this show, don't be shy. Reach out to me at Jemmy, spelled Jaime, at flintstonemedia.com. It's producer Jemmy signing off for now. Remember, the only thing more powerful than your voice is your spirit to use it. So turn that mic on.